this was the most fostering of having a life outside of work that I had ever had.
That was Sally Sue Beisel-Lander. You're listening to The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris-Walker. This is the podcast where we hold the space for successful women in Hollywood to tell their stories. In this episode, I have a very special treat for you. In fact, it's going to be 2 episodes because the conversation was so long and so juicy. I have the entire production management team from the show Brothers and Sisters. You may remember that. It was on ABC a few years ago. It ran for 5 seasons. So here's who we have. Sarah Caplan, the executive producer and line producer of Brothers and Sisters, as well as Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Ray Donovan, Lost, Alias, Felicity, GCB, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. We have Suzanne Geiger, UPM and co-producer of Brothers and Sisters, Quantico, Red Band Society, The Neighbors, Alias, GCB, Studio 60. Cynthia Pusheck, the cinematographer and director of photography, who's also done Justice, Cold Case, Good Girls Revolt, Close to Home, CSI Miami, and Revenge. Sally Sue Beisel-Lander, who's a first assistant director and co-producer. Her credits include Alias, Togetherness, Insecure, Ray Donovan, Baskets, True Detective. Denny Dugally, who's the production designer of the Gilmore Girls reunion, The Saint, Agent X, Sleepy Hollow, GCB, Felicity. And Idly Henderson-Williams, the production accountant, who you may remember from episode 16 of the podcast. Besides doing Brothers and Sisters, she's also done Rizzoli and Isles, Because of Winn-Dixie, Planet of the Apes, Anna and the King, and right now she's on Counterpart. And Melina, costume designer. She's on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Superstore, State of Affairs, Guys with Kids, That 70s Show, Third Rock from the Sun, and Wayne's World. Can you even believe this panel? So this was a first. We had them all, we had 5 of them in the room, and we had 2 people on Skype. So Suzanne Geiger and Denny Dugally were on Skype, so their audio sounds like they're on Skype. Everyone else was in the room. And I think this is a really interesting and important episode. They talk about a lot of things, what it was like to work together, how it was different than working on other productions, what it's like to be a woman growing up in this business. And also, they got really real about sexism and sexual harassment. Typically, people don't like to tell me about the sexual harassment until I turn the microphone off, but these ladies were very brave and told us some stories. So, you can find us at theother50%.com. You can also go there to buy swag, coffee cups, t-shirts, tote bags. You can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, on Twitter at Other50%, and on Instagram at Other50% Podcast. And we now have a sister podcast called The Other 50%, A Herstory of Tech. You can also find it on iTunes or on the same website, theother50%.com. That is where I talk to women in all kinds of technical industries and hear their stories. Really interesting stuff and really great guests so far. Okay, here are the women of Brothers and Sisters. So, first of all, thank you all for joining us on The Other 50%. I cannot believe this room of powerful women that we have assembled. So thank you so much for that. It's feeling like the other 100% right now. So my first question is, who did most of the hiring of this group? Was it you, Sarah? Was it you, Suzanne?
Me.
Sarah.
Me.
Now, did you intentionally set out to hire a bunch of women, or is that just how it turned out?
I don't intend to, but because I've worked with a lot of women, so often they're the first people who come to mind.
This is Sarah Caplan.
Because of the successful working in the past with them. And a couple of them I've made into what they are now. So I just know that they're good at their job. So if they're available, like I was just checking on Suzanne's availability.
It's a networking podcast.
I try and grab grab them if I can. Unfortunately, I introduced Sally Sue to HBO in an emergency, and I've never got her back from them.
Yeah, that was a big mistake, apparently.
I'm very sad about that.
Having so many women in power in this production, and I don't think we've mentioned it was Brothers and Sisters, which was a great show that went on for many years. Was this an unusual or an atypical experience for you guys to have so many women in power?
Yes.
Okay, Suzanne, was that you?
Yes, definitely.
What does a typical set look like?
A lot of guys, except in hair and makeup and wardrobe.
Is that the same experience for everyone?
I have to say, I see a lot of photos lately of people posting pictures going, look how many women are on our crew, and it's great, and they're all very excited showing that there's a female director, like 4 or 5 women.
And this is Cynthia.
And I want to be like, oh, we had you beat back in '07. But
guys are way ahead of the
there's still
curve.
so much pride when you're on a crew with a lot of women, and that's great. But back in '07, it was, even more rare than now.
I would have to say I might be the anomaly at this table.
Sally Sue.
I've been doing this for 28 years, and from my very first job, I've been always working with women. I don't think I ever realized it was an odd experience to have that. Working with Sarah on Brothers and Sisters was the first time I think I ever felt like I was working with women who wanted to foster me and make my career everything it could be, as opposed to just keep hiring me at what I was, if that makes sense. So it was a different experience for me in the sense that I felt very supported and proud of the women I was working with, but I had a lot of experience working with women through the years.
So was it a real nurturing, mentoring environment? It sounded
Mentoring, that's a great way to put it, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Now here's Melina.
I have mostly done comedy, so for me, Brothers and Sisters was a sort of foray into drama. So I mostly worked with men.
Because women aren't funny, so they don't work in
Women aren't
comedy,
funny.
I've heard.
I know this because I was actually at Saturday Night Live, where women were not funny, until suddenly they were funny and you could make money off of them. So, but I've worked with a lot of female executive producers. Not that many female line producers.
Oh, interesting. Denny, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, my experience has been mostly men in everything that I've done until Brothers and Sisters, and then it was this wonderful experience of working with all these crazy talented women. But prior to that, it's been men, and since then, it's been mostly men as well.
Now, they say, there's a saying, if there's one woman in politics, it changes the woman. But when there's enough women in politics, it changes politics. And there's a tipping point. It's around 24%, where then it becomes an environment where women become comfortable and can be themselves, and it changes everything. Can you describe what this working environment was like with so many women? Was it different than other sets?
Well, for me,
This is Ida Lee.
I find that sometimes I have to modify or soften or be less forceful when I'm in a more male environment, because they don't hear that. They don't hear directness from women as easily as other women do. And for me, it was an environment where I felt like I could just be me. I could just say how it was. I could discuss things openly. I didn't feel constantly like I was self-editing.
She didn't have to couch what you said in a nice, pleasant way with a smile on your face?
Right. I mean, I might still do that, but I didn't have to.
An important difference.
Yeah.
For me, it was important timing in my career, because I went from being a person who was not a department head to being a person. Sarah is the one who asked me if I wanted to become a first AD.
And this is Sally Sue again.
And before that, I was always a PA or second or a second AD. So to work in this environment when I became a first was really important, because when you're a woman in charge, and I think all of us here can speak to this, you're often seen as either a pushover or a bitch. And it's really hard to ride that fine line. And working with this group of women when I was becoming a first was super important, because trying to ride that fine line of having power and authority and being respected and not being a pushover, women are often seen as either weak and easy or bitchy and tough. And like Ida Lee had said in her last podcast, being able to communicate with men who you're in charge of or you're managing is sometimes a tricky thing. I think you called it the Charlie Brown voice, where you just sort of go away. I call it, I become your wife, and you just stop hearing what I say. There's been times I've stood in the middle of set and screamed out that rehearsal's up next, and a man will literally turn around and go, "What are we doing now?" And I'm like, what did you just hear me say? I don't understand that. Right now. So working with Sarah, who one believed in me to make me a first AD, and then also who's an incredible example of someone who's respected and smart and not a pushover, but also not a bitch, and loves people and respects them and tries to take care of them and always puts the crew first. That was incredible for me, and something I'll always have with me from this group.
And how great to be in an environment where you could have the time to learn that delicate balance in a safe place where you could learn it. Mm-hmm. And then have you been able to take that other places and have it translate?
I hope so.
Well, we'll call those people and ask them.
I don't know. I'll have to work with Sarah, and she can tell you how well I've done.
And here is Sarah.
Because I don't think about it, so I never think about how I relate to people in that way, men or women, but I find that I've had, since those shows, I've been on some shows where the showrunners have been really difficult, and I'm hopeless at dealing with them, frankly. I just find them overwhelmingly unpleasant. I can't think, and I'm like looking and I'm like, okay, I have to get off this show as fast as I can.
Don't tell me that. You're ruining my image.
That's how you sort it out.
So
I gotta go.
Because it's like, I can only put it, I don't know what it is. I'm not particularly diplomatic by nature, so if somehow I get away with it because I'm not conscious of it. But once somebody starts giving me a hard time in a kind of crazy way, I'm like, okay, this person's crazy. I don't know what to do.
I mean, honestly, how much do you think the accent helps?
Because I don't think it helps at all.
Really? Because
Yeah.
I think Americans, we assume a level of politeness just when you open your mouth.
No, because I swear a lot, so that goes away.
Everyone's nodding. Yes, that is true.
If she's
That is
ticked off,
true.
you know it.
But I think it's like if you seem nervous and unsure, then then people get worried about it, and then they start to try and solve the things that they don't need to solve, or they don't respect you. But as long as you can convince people that if they jump off the ship, they're going to land in the water, it's going to be fine, then that's kind of the ploy. That's
Confidence is key.
Confidence is key.
Suzanne.
The two things I think that Sarah exemplifies is that she won't work on something she doesn't want to work on or doesn't respect. So for her, the project is very important, and that's a quality of life thing that I don't think maybe a man would be as key on. And the other thing, and having worked with other people, that's very important is making decisions, right or wrong. Because if you're indecisive, the people who work for you will not respect you. In fact, I hear all the time about people who have worked with me or with us, and they go on to do other projects, and they work with people who are maybe not as knowledgeable, or at most are indecisive. And that's like the worst thing you can do. And to be an indecisive female is probably the worst thing you can do. So the thing I learned from Sarah is just make a decision, and move forward.
So do you think as women you have to be better?
You have to be better, yes.
Yes.
Yes, probably do.
Yeah.
We all know you have to be better.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be self-polite about it.
There's a tighter range that you can walk, and you can't, if you're outside that range as a guy, you can be more of a dick, you can be more of a pushover, because you can be friendly and dad-like, or you can be, an asshole and people respect it, but with a woman, that's about this big.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you find it harder to allow collaboration because that can be perceived as weakness and people can run all over you?
No, not at all.
Okay. Denny, did you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing because I think collaboration is key.
Yeah, it's all about collaboration.
And I think it's not a good thing if you don't collaborate truly as a woman. I think that it shows you as a more powerful woman because you don't think that your way is the only way. You want to share that with the people who work for you and the people that you work with.
I think that's what was so successful about that show.
This is Melina.
I mean, art department, DP, for hair and makeup. I thought that worked really well on that show. That was a really creative, collaborative experience. And with the one we're doing now with Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, it's really refreshing to be able to speak openly with design ideas and not worry about what you're thought of. Mm-hmm. So it's great to have ideas and make mistakes.
Yeah, that freedom must make a better product if you're not afraid to speak up.
A lot of shows end up with each department in an island, and they don't help each other,
This is Suzanne.
and they fight against each other. I mean, I on a show that shall remain nameless fairly recently, I had an art department and a special effects department and a construction department that wouldn't work together and would blame each other. And as a result, things wouldn't happen because it was their fault and they suck. And instead of just saying, how can we make a great product and how can we work together and make this better and great, they're all like, he said, she said, oh, it's awful. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to repeat some things maybe that Sally Sue said.
Cynthia.
Is that I hadn't shot a whole lot when I started Brothers and Sisters. I had one show, done about, maybe a dozen episodes altogether, and I'd moved up as an operator. So for me, it was a really amazing job to get and to be on a show and with crew and people who were very supportive as you're learning how to navigate. And Sarah, if she pulled you aside and wagged her finger, it was, it was never, you never felt like somebody was pointing fingers at the problem. It was like, we all need to figure this out. Or if she pulled us aside about making our day, there was a sense of, how can we solve this problem? How are we going to, as a team, figure these things out? And I went to another show, again, will remain nameless, where it was very much about finger pointing and screaming and yelling. And it was never a sense of, why did we go 15 minutes over last night? What was the problem? Why we can't have this happen? It was never a feeling that we were all a team trying to solve these problems and make this work. And I just really made me so much even more appreciate Brothers and Sisters for the work environment as being that positive when you go to something else again and there's, like you said, different departments fighting or finger pointing. It was never a sense we're all a team figuring it out.
And did you know when you were in it? Did you all recognize it and say, wow, this is a really special thing? Or was it after you got on some crappy show?
It was really enjoyable, I thought.
Yeah.
It was a really fun day.
Yeah,
We knew it.
and appreciated it.
Yeah.
Then yet you should really get the band back together.
Yes. It's so hard now
It's so
because
hard.
of how the business has changed with the shorter seasons, and now there's so much product, and a lot of it's not made in town, and so everybody's kind of got into different cycles and things, so it's just kind of complicated to get it all back together. Also, I think over the years there's been a shift in the power of showrunners who get involved in production in a way which is complicated because they often don't really understand what the effect they have on the production when they do that. Whereas they don't understand if you work people a lot of long hours, eventually it's not very productive. It's expensive and it's not productive because people don't do that well working. It's just a scientific fact. You can't get around it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I always try to do is make sure that the hours aren't horrible. Now, they're always going to be horrible for certain departments like hair and makeup, but for other departments you can kind of make it a little bit more manageable. And actually not wardrobe, a lot of the wardrobe department has terrible sort of long hours.
Yeah, but we can, we swap it out.
You can stagger.
You can stagger.
Yeah, we
but
stagger them.
It's, I mean, that's one critical piece of the puzzle where some showrunners think you're sort of pathetic if you can't shoot 14 hours a day. Although now the studios are beginning to stop you from doing that too. So
Fox pulls the plug at 13 now.
That was Suzanne.
And do you think that's over cost or over unions?
Both. It's for safety, so it's a CYA for the studio, so they're not blamed, and then it's cheaper. It's cheaper not to go into massive overtime.
Yeah. And it seems like you must get diminishing returns when you're working people that many hours.
Diminishing returns.
And you're not saving any money if everyone's at double time.
I always bring up a lot when I'm on other shows. The lesson I always say from Brothers and Sisters is that we learned once we added a 9th day that we worked less hours and we did it for the same or less as when we worked 8 long days, because the overtime is so expensive.
Right.
That that extra day actually took the heat off the hours and then was the same price or less.
Did you hear that? All of Hollywood?
Yeah, people.
It's
people
been, like
don't-
Sarah said,
but,
it's been proven, but it's...
Believe you, because it's very hard to explain. You have to spend money to save money, and that's what Sarah was good at.
Now, how did the men on your crew respond to all the women in power?
I think they liked it. But for the most part, I think...
Sarah.
They weren't insecure men,
remember
though,
any
so I think they were fine with it.
Yeah.
That's Sally Sue.
They weren't...
Yeah.
I find the only problems I really have, for the most part, to really dumb it down, is when you're dealing with insecure men. Other than that, I think, why wouldn't you be receptive to someone who works the kind of hours we work and puts in the kind of passion we put in and really cares. Because I would say everybody at this table always really cares about the projects they pick and works very hard and is very passionate about their job. And how could you hate that unless you're insecure?
And if you create a nice environment, that everybody benefits from that.
Well, and Sarah created an environment. I don't have children, but Suzanne had 2 children while we were shooting, and we built a nursery. And it was welcome. Sarah, also, we built a gym while we were there. It was very much about making sure you had balance in your life, which I think often you don't have. And it's really, that is something I don't think I've ever had to that extent. I did work on another job where every Wednesday we hired a yoga teacher and had an hour lunch and would do yoga. But beyond that, this was the most fostering of having a life outside of work that I had ever had.
Now, that was actually going to be one of my questions. So, Suzanne, you had babies on the show?
Yes, I had Amelia on Brothers and Sisters and Pablo. I went into labor during the production meeting on GCB.
We had to make her go to the hospital. Suzanne, say what it is.
Both times she had to make me go.
She would not go.
Like, no, wait, I'll be fine. It's just gas.
Now, how was it being pregnant and working in this environment? Because I have heard some humdingers of some stories from women working on production while pregnant that were not good. How was your experience?
Well, it was fine. I was fortunate not only with Sarah, very pro about it, but also our production exec, Brenda Kyle, was very pro about having, working and being a working mom. I do say that I knew in a weird way a long time ago I had to get to UPM in order to have kids, because it's a far more forgiving position to be pregnant in than, say, to be on set. It would be very hard to be a first AD and be huge at some point,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or a camera woman, it would be complicated.
Yeah, there are more and more women who figured out how to come with ranks and have kids and family, but I think usually you have to make sure you have a partner at home.
That's Cynthia.
Who's going to be taking care of this child. But we did a day at the ASC a couple weeks back that was all, the old boys club of the ASC was just full of women. And it was all these women operators and assistants and DPs. And it's great to see the next generation, like you said, that there's more of them now. So they're supporting each other. They're learning from each other, realizing you can figure out how to be pregnant on set and operate, and you can figure out how to deal with that. And I think that's great, and I think it's changing. It doesn't mean it's easy, but more of them are figuring out how to do it.
Okay, now I'm just going to jump in for a second and explain some of this jargon. That was Cynthia Pusheck talking. She's a cinematographer, and she was referring to the ASC, which is the American Society of Cinematographers. She talked about operators, which is camera operators, and DP, which is director of photography.
Well, it's not easy no matter where you are, but I think it's particularly hard on a film set.
On camera.
I think that the position that is nearly impossible to have and be pregnant is stunt woman.
Again, Suzanne.
Because you literally can't do stunts. And I know of stunt women who've had their babies through surrogates in order to be able to continue working, because otherwise they just have to stop. You can't be pregnant and do stunts.
Fair point.
And it is hard, like Suzanne mentioned, not to say, every position has its problems, but when you're on set standing all day long for 15 hours a day, 14 hours a day, it's physically challenging. And like Cynthia's saying, you either have to schedule it around when you're not working and then see what that does to your family income, or try to figure out how to work and do that. And I've had a couple friends be able to do it, but it's tough.
That's Sally Sue.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the higher position you have, the easier the producer gets to have an extra room with the nanny at the office and have the baby there. The PA not so much.
Right. It is an issue.
Okay, I'm going to assume that you recognize Sarah's voice by now.
When I had my daughter, I was at Bedford Falls. We did 30-something, and I worked in the script part of it, and I also worked on Ed Zwick's movies. But so I had my baby in the middle of a movie and came back and had the baby. And then never asked them. I never said anything, but I just would bring her with my nanny to work. And my nanny would wander around the lot, the CBS lot, with her, and then bring her back for me to feed. And I never asked anybody but I would take out my breast in public. I didn't have a shawl, and I'd just slap her on the thing, and I'd walk around with her. And it never occurred to me to ask, because I could not imagine being told no. And they never said anything. And I said, later I asked them, what did you think about it? And they said, well, at first we thought it was a little bit weird, but then sometimes you come in and we'd be having a fight about something, and you come in with Stella on your breast, and we'd all go, oh. And they was like they just sort of didn't do anything about it. And I just wonder if, and then another woman on the show had a baby at the same time, and she would pump in the bathroom, and she was a writer. I mean, she could have done exactly the same thing, but she didn't. And she had someone look after her baby at home, didn't have it at work. But it was just, I could not have been separated. I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
And it just didn't occur to me. So that's how I got away with it, really.
I love it. I love it. Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
I find oddly that sometimes women are harder to get around than men with the baby stuff, especially women who did it a different way or haven't had kids, are a little less forgiving, oddly. I don't know why. It's a weird one where you're like, no, this is okay. You have to allow it. And you're fighting, saying it's a medical condition. We have to, accommodate, because it's important for women to be able to have kids and do these jobs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But there also may be other baggage that's going on that really has nothing to do with you're having a baby at work, but more about, oh my God, you're having a baby, that precipitates that kind of behavior.
Also, the workplaces, no workplace is really designed to accommodate the babies.
Or families.
So that's always an issue, I think. And there's this whole insurance thing. It's like insurance drives much of the way we live and the risks we take and so forth. But if they can't figure out, no company is going to put in a crash system without it being very monitored, because then they're so liable if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Well, except they have it in corporate America, so
Oh yeah, but
They kind of do.
I mean, Warner Brothers has childcare.
But it's pretty hard. You have to drive over to where it is. It's not even on their law. It's kind of...
Yeah,
it's
I don't know.
better than nothing,
but it's better than nothing. I mean, my kids were all born when I was doing multicams, and I think in the time that I worked at Carsey Werner for 10 years.
This is Melina.
There were 11 babies born in my department. And there was a breast pump going for at least 4 years.
Constantly.
In one room or another. But, part of it was Carsey Werner was an independent production company. Part of it was things were a little bit looser at the time. And also we were a department that sort of allowed that to happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done costume fittings being strapped to breast pumps. And with like a nice little large book in front of me.
The Hooter Hider.
Yeah.
Cynthia.
When I started, I knew a lot of women coming up the ranks who chose to leave the business because they wanted to have kids and they didn't know how to do camera.
Cynthia.
And so I think what Suzanne is saying is important. We can't keep getting more women to come up the ranks if they feel like they can't have a family, and especially there still are not enough directors of photography and camera operators. So that's what I've been really trying to do, is encourage more women to keep moving up the ranks. And if they know there's a way they can figure out how to have a kid, a lot may not leave the business like all the women I came up with.
I mean, I'm seeing sort of the other side of it, is I'm seeing a lot of costumers that I knew who now are in their late 30s, early 40s, have young kids, and won't take a full-time job. Like they can't take, there's absolutely no way for them to work more than 3 days a week on a show. So I have these highly skilled women that I would like to hire, but I can't because they cannot find childcare. And what they get paid for 3 days as a costumer doesn't cover adequate childcare.
Right.
So do they want to be working? But
They want to
can't?
work. They can't.
Yeah.
It's cheaper for them to stay home and take care of the kids. I mean, we're the second lowest paid category. So
Well, that's where the partner comes in. Your earlier point. It's very hard to have two successful career people and manage the childcare in the home.
Yeah, someone needs to commit to make that decision.
Cynthia.
Or you have
if
to
you
hire
can,
all the
or
help.
you're paying for a nanny full time, which is the price of that is too much for some people in certain departments. So.
Well, and I think one of the differences too is in our industry, we don't really know what hours we're going to work.
This is Ida Lee.
We can't, set up childcare from X time to X time because
Yeah, you don't know if you're going to have a 4 o'clock call. I mean, that was the most of the customers that I know when they have kids go do multi-cameras because they know they're going to start it at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
And
'cause
that
you
they
also-
can set their schedule to do that.
We also don't know when we're going to work because we're freelance.
Sally Sue.
So, back in the day, if you chose network TV, which was one of the reasons I went on Brothers and Sisters at the time my husband and I were thinking we were going to have children. And I thought, I'll take a network TV job because I had done features before that. And I'll know when I'm working and it'll be great. Little did I know that it would be the same level of hard work, but 10 months out of the year, as opposed to my much cushier feature schedule that I had. But you don't know when your next job is. And even if you feel like you know when it is, as Cynthia just spoke to us earlier, you think I have this job and then it can just go away. Mm-hmm. I always say I don't believe I have a job till I have my second paycheck.
Yeah.
So that would be incredibly terrifying to bring a child into this environment if you are freelance like that.
Yeah, and then if you have childcare, do you give up the childcare between jobs, and then you
Right.
don't have a consistent caretaker?
How do you keep somebody?
Or do you keep them even though you're not making any money?
I would say 75% of my earnings have gone to my nanny
Melina.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Me too.
over the years.
Wow.
I mean, the amount of time that I keep her employed when I'm not working versus, when I actually need her, but it's really, I have no choice.
Yeah, I'm not working right now, and I'm keeping my nanny because I know I'll work again, and I can't lose my nanny.
Mm-hmm. I still have my nanny.
Stella's how old?
Stella's twice a week. She's my nanny.
She's
Comes
yours.
twice a week.
She's
Clean the house. I
transitioned.
can't get rid of her.
How old's your daughter?
27.
Soon she'll just take care of all of us. It'll be great.
That's what I tell my nanny. Would you come and take care of me when I am old? And
Yeah, I'm like, although I see she's getting older too. I'm like, how's this going to work?
Who's going to take care of who?
Take care of each other.
At some point, they're just family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the point where they should stop charging you, really, and just come over and help you. How have you seen this business change since you guys have been in it?
Oh. I
Everyone's
started
grimacing.
I started in film, and then but alongside us was always going this television show, and I think what happened is, film became it's very sporadic. I used to prep. I think I prepped 3 movies that eventually got made. One I still worked on, but 2 of them I never worked on them again because somebody else took them over. And I was like, what? And then you don't get paid. You do all the work. And then someone would say, do you want to do this? You go, I've prepped it in my head. I've made this. This movie has been made. I don't want to go through it again. So then I thought, television's a much more secure thing. And it used to be really LA. So if you had a kid, you could work in LA. So that was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then I did a pilot, and I got a job on something else, and I was running out of money, and I got this other pilot, and after that I did not stop working. I went from a short order to a show that was already on the air for a season, and that director took me to do his next pilot, and that was on the air for 4 I did 4 years of it. It was on the air for 5 years. Then we went with that group of people to Brothers and Sisters. That was another 5 years. And then they told us at the end of the season, which was really late for anybody to find work, that they weren't picking us up, which was So we took GCB for a year, for a season. It was a short season, it was 13 episodes, but it got everybody through to the next jump. And so that was incredible. But now, to be on a 22-episode show is really unusual, I think. And mostly they're not that good anymore. When you see how good the product is from cable or I guess HBO's cable, isn't it? All these
premium
suppliers,
channels.
these premium channels. I mean, it's just so much better. But they're not very long episodes because you can't. It's really hard to do 22 good shows. It's not. It's less hard to do 10 fantastic shows.
Yeah, anyone can do a 10 episode something.
You can make them really good. I mean, there's a bit more quality to them, so that's kind of the appeal of them in a way.
But it doesn't make for a 5-year job.
No, and it doesn't make for. It's really hard to make. I think I earn about a half to a third of what I used to earn, even if I work the whole. I seem to be working all the time.
Because of the seasons or because something
Because
has
of the
changed with the pay
seasons,
scale?
the number of shows you do for each place, the deals you can make. It's just like, it's weird.
So it sounds like it's a bit more scrappy than it used
It's
to
very
be.
scrappy.
Yeah, it's scrappy, and also the way designers used to deal with it. I mean, I don't know about DPs or production designers. Well, but you would do 2 or 3 shows.
At the same time?
Yeah. And now you're not. The studios don't let you do that. So you could only do 1 show at a time unless you get special permission from an executive producer or the network or something.
Okay, who else wants to weigh in on how the business has changed since you got in?
Well, if we do want to talk about the sexism of it, it's changed a lot.
Oh, we'll get to that.
You'll get to that. But when I started in Chicago as camera assisting, there was, and you're calling everybody, and there was a lot of commercials and small projects. They would continually say things like, a woman in camera, well, if all the guys are busy, maybe we'll think about calling you. And it was really,
Right on.
it was like, well, we have about 5 or 6 of our regular guys. If they're busy, maybe we'll hire you.
Maybe
So
we'll
it was
hire
a
the
real,
unicorn.
it wasn't just, it was very close. So when I came to LA seemed great in comparison to Chicago. And there were other women who were camera assistants and other women working. So to me, LA was great. But now looking back, you see how much it's changed and how much better it is. And so I think there's a lot of positive things going on. There's more work, there's more projects, there's more shows for people, but it is also scrappier and less money. And I hear a lot of DPs talk about the lack of respect that they feel that's changed, that DPs aren't respected as much, and maybe some of that's digital, and I know more and more DPs sliding over to direct because they feel like that gives them some of their creative power and more respect than they weren't getting as DPs.
That's interesting. Because when everyone thinks they can make anything on their iPhone, it makes it less of a mythical...
But
And there's more, so many cameras, and it's great because you can get cameras in your hand and go shoot amazing things with less money. It used to be so hard to try to get a film camera and get film, the processing, and so now people can start shooting sooner, and it's great. But I think on some TV shows, the amount of work you have to do and the hours and trying to do film quality in 8 days, it just wears down.
Were you going to say something?
Well, I feel that's interesting to hear you say that because I feel like there's the lack of respect thing is interesting because, and I think, Sarah, you might be able to speak to this better than I can, but in the years I've been doing it, I feel as if it's become harder and less fun and less respectful from our end of it because the people up above, when I first started in film, you got a negative pickup. So you were given the money and told, go make your film and then we'll get it at the end. So there was nobody involved in telling you what to do and giving you notes and all of that. And I feel like now I, as a first AD, often have showrunners, producers, creators, writers all on set telling me what they want, and there's no respect for the director or the DP or the first AD, or it's everybody thinks it's so easy to make that they all want to put their 2 cents in. And it used to be, you said, hey, Melina, I trust you. You're great. You're really good at your job. I've looked at your resume. I've interviewed people or talked to people, and I want to hire you. Here's your budget. Go do your thing. And now it's, hey, Melina, you're really great. Now, I was thinking, what if we did this, 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 and this? And how about if we do it that way? And why are you spending this there when you should be spending this there? Yeah. And from my perspective, a lot of the fun has gone out of it because of that. And then add to it that I'm a first AD, and so now I'm legally responsible for all safety and all things bad. So the amount of pressure on me to deal with all that legal crap that you were kind of saying before, and I don't say legal crap meaning I take any of that lightly. It's just, how did I become the sole responsible person on set? I don't know. I feel like everybody's making decisions together. We're all responsible together.
Until something goes wrong, then it's all your fault.
Exactly. And that kind of speaks to what Sarah was saying earlier about it's all about insurance and liability. And that has become way more prevalent at the same time where everybody wants to give us their 2 cents on how to make it. And I don't think a trained monkey could do what I do. All I bring is experience. And so if you're hiring me for my experiences. So if you want my opinion, then I would imagine that's why you have me around, is to put in my 2 cents on how to do something and not just tell me how to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel it in my department because we're always, it's the worst in my department, except maybe hair and makeup. But, you know, you'll be like, can I have another gray cashmere sweater? Can I have another gray cashmere sweater? You don't like this one? Let's, you know, so you've gone from being a designer to being a shopper. And clothes is something that everybody has an opinion on. So I think the mechanics and the logistics of it are really a fog to most executive producers. And a lot of what we do is sort of intimate with actors. So, you know, I'm oftentimes in a position where I can't say why an actor can't wear something or isn't comfortable in something, and I'm caught between a producer and an actor oftentimes. And that's really complicated nowadays. And a network. So there's the upper level of the studio and the network. I mean, we've done entire shows where I've had 3 producers who have different opinions. You narrow that down and you convince them what the one thing should be. You send it to the studio. The studio doesn't like it and they want something else. You change it for the studio, and then everybody, so far you've agreed all that, and then you change it. Then you send it to the network, and the network doesn't like it at all, and then you change it all, you know, and then after a while it's like you're back to your same gray cashmere sweater.
And then the VP walks up and says, do they have to wear this color?
And you know, you look at the DP and they go, you're right, it's a terrible color, but that's what the network wants. So or that's what the exec, so you've become sort of, you have all these skills that you don't use.
Yeah, too many could say.
But
Actors walk on set, they all look the same.
Yeah.
I remember we on a show on GCB that they did the publicity shoot for, and someone had dressed all the lead actresses in Herve Leger bandage dresses of different primary colors. And when they came out, because we were shooting something and they were there, and the executive goes, that's how the show should look. And you were like, and we had this genius designer, who was actually a man with me, and he made these amazing costumes for the actors, because it was semi-comic, and he'd do all this amazing work. And they had no idea of how funny and how great the work that was being done, and the people weren't in Herve Leger bandage dresses in primary colors. It was like that. It's beyond me when that happens.
Well, yeah.
And with the costume department, literally, I'd get calls from someone at ABC, and he'd like, all I can see is her sitting in her white cardigan with her hair unbrushed and stuff, giving me a thing about it doesn't look very fashionable. I'm like, what on earth possesses you to weigh in on this? It's hopeless.
Well, I mean, but I think part of this is that, you know, we so much of, you know, the Hollywood Reporter has an issue on stylists. It doesn't have an issue on costume designers. Stylists create a look, and a look is just a veneer. A costume designer will create the story of a character. So that's more complicated and occasionally messier, and hopefully has more dimension. So I think that's what we're always battling against in what we do. It's like we want the actors to look great and look appropriate and a little bit fashionable, and if you're at ABC, you want them to be aspirational. I mean, I never had a network note on Brothers and Sisters. I never sent a photograph to anyone. All those clothes were done alone in a room with me and the actors.
Yeah,
and that was
now
enough.
I have to go through a gauntlet.
And then it changed. But that's another reason not to work for network, because it's not quite so bad. But someone I know just worked on something in costumes, and they were given a palette. They weren't allowed to use black, red, or white. and something else when they and then they would complain because the actors would show up sometimes on a scene in the same kind of shades as things because she had so limited things, and they just reject clothes all the time. So she just, if
You're all wearing peach today.
yeah, it was so complicated. And then she was like, I don't know what to do. I said, leave, just leave them.
That would be
They're
like me
they're
saying
not worth it.
there will be no adverbs in your script.
Yes.
You're not allowed to have adverbs. And your adjectives can only start with the letter, M through Z. I mean,
And it's people
just,
who are not experts or
Yeah.
craftspeople or artists.
It's
But
it's so disrespectful.
But it's
weird.
why when you get on a project that allows you that, it's so special. Like, I'm very fortunate. I'm currently on the same kind of thing where we have kind of autonomy and nobody really bothers us, and it's great. And when you have that now, you realize, oh, that's a gem. I don't want to leave this. Like, I love this, and I will do anything to stay with this.
Well, and then you should speak to how costume and production designer have to work together so that the actors aren't wearing the same color as the walls or the tablecloth. I mean, that's a problem too.
That's Suzanne.
Absolutely. And
seen that
what I
happen.
normally do is I'll talk to the DP
And this is Denny.
and I'll talk to the costume designer and show them the palette that we're going for and make sure that everyone is on the same page. And I mean, in Brothers and Sisters, it worked out brilliantly.
Yeah,
all
it
the
was
time.
seamless,
I
yeah.
don't think we ever had. How many sets did I do over 5 years? Like
I don't know. I
100
mean-
sets, and I don't think we had a single set that was an issue.
No, never. And we never, even in the decoration, because my whole thing is like you dress an actor and you have these conversations with an actor about their character in a fitting, and you just hope that the set was decorated in the same way so that, aside from just very simple things like colors clashing or patterns, whether it was the same person who wore the clothes and whose apartment looked like it. And that was a really unique experience on Brothers and Sisters. Because it would be like I would walk in, I would like, oh, absolutely, this is absolutely who they are. And I haven't really had that. I mean, partly because you're a great art department, and you had a great set decorator. And
Now, is that because of communication you had between each other while you're working, or is it concept meetings at the beginning? What made that happen?
well, I think partly Sarah hired us, so she knew how to
It's
make
as you
the
go along, because it
thing.
comes out a little bit in the concept meeting, but then it gets refined. So then they have to run around amongst each other and show each other.
You hire people who are confident and skilled and aren't intimidated by communicating and working together.
and have similar tastes, I
Yeah.
think.
Sarah sort of, if you're not working together, demands that you work together. So it's expected, and you do it. I've worked on other shows where those departments don't talk, and the actors do wear the same clothes as the wall, or color, and the basic stuff. Or everybody's in bright white, and the DP wants to shoot themselves. I mean, there are a lot of dysfunctional places out there, and Sarah's really good at making you all work together almost by expecting it or poking you if you're not doing it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it goes back to your comment about departments getting along together. And my first thing on most days of prep is running down the hall to talk to the production designer or to talk about, these things. And it's a really important part of the communication is checking to see what are you going to do with this party and what colors and flavors, because I need to know that if I'm designing the lighting. But after Revenge, I am not afraid of white people in white clothes and white rooms anymore. We constantly, it's like, oh, they would run up to me, I'm so sorry, it's a white coat. And it's like,
But it's also important for Denny to talk to Cynthia about the set, so Cynthia can figure out where to bring the light from, too.
and when everybody gets along and likes each other, it's just so much easier to go through all of that.
Well,
without-
and we didn't have divas. I've been in work environments where
That's Ida Lee.
that should be happening, but the reason it doesn't is because you have one of those departments who thinks they are God's gift to the world of making product, and they simply refuse to cooperate.
Because their piece is not going to be changed, regardless.
Yes, yeah. So that's it too, and again, I think that's a female environment. We are naturally more collaborative. We aren't so ego-driven. We don't have to be the star. Well, sometimes.
Now, have any of you ever experienced any sexism in this business? Any hint
Tons.
What does it look like?
Well, I have to say,
That's Denny.
in regards to this question and your previous question, the way the industry has changed, I find it to be just as sexist. And now that I'm a woman in my 50s, it's become ageist as well. Mm. And it is crazy the 30 years of experience that I bring to the party, and I lose jobs out to, young producers, young directors who hire their buddies to design their picture or their series because they went to school with them or whatever it was. Somebody who has no experience can beat me out on a job because I'm a woman, because of my age. And that hasn't changed, truly. And I actually experienced some crazy sexism when I went to Wilmington, North Carolina to do, can I talk about this?
Yep.
Can I be frank?
Please.
To do that show.
Yeah, there was a show that I did out of town in a part of the country that is very southern. And I was literally talked to the production designer, and I had over 100 men on my construction crew. And I was referred to as little lady.
Well, you're in the South. I mean, I'm in the South right now.
Yeah, well,
it's different.
It is different, but it's also there. It was definitely sexist, though, Suzanne. It wasn't that sweet Southern thing. It was sexism. It was really blatant sexism, and it's alive and well in our industry, and it's unfortunate. But I think that we just fight it as best we can. We be the best person that we can be, and hopefully, if we want a show, and they want us, then it works out. But it's definitely still there, and it's kind of surprising, but no more surprising than our political climate right now.
Well, I've worked in the South, and I've worked in Atlanta and Texas and Pennsylvania, and Philly, and all that. I find the thing is you have to adapt how you manage people to who they are and where they are. Like in the South, you always have to remember to do the pleasantries first. If you go straight into work, they don't know how to handle it. How was your weekend? How was your family? Yada yada. Okay, when do I get the quote?
Suzanne.
I actually found Philly's crew to be sort of the one that stymied me the most. I find the South is just frustrating, whereas Philly was just like, I want to hit myself in the head. Texas, the South, I can handle that. I think the trick is really having to adapt to each place or person and how you manage each crew. And I guess for like Sarah or Sally Sue, especially, we're really working with everybody. So you're managing everyone from transpo to makeup and hair to the actors. So for me, Philly was the hardest. I couldn't quite figure it out. I think if I'd been there longer, probably, but it was weird. I mean, Sarah and I had we had to meet with the unions directly because we were with Warner Horizon, and that was a very weird experience because when you're in a big network show, you're not allowed to talk to them. So, I've gone up against the Teamsters in 3 different regions, and I don't know. It's just you just have to keep adapting.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying about the social side of it, knowing that, and I've watched that so many times, especially co-DPing and watching during prep, where all the guys just immediately talk to the male DP during, when you're pre-lighting and talking and everyone's interrupting you, and then you're trying to, and then 2 minutes later they're saying what you were trying to say. Mm-hmm. And all of those kind of games going on, but it still comes back to they expect you to behave in a different way. And at the end of the day, if that helps you get what you want, that's fine. If it means I have to be a little more social and start the morning that way, but I get what I want and I get the crew is happy and I'm happy, so it's all good. It's those other situations where you're just wanting to, try to be heard. And like saying, if you get too loud and too abrasive then you're the bitch. And you're always riding and seeing who your crew and how they handle certain situations. But it was interesting recently, co-DPing with someone, and lovely person, but everybody, he even apologized a couple times, realizing he was stepping all over me. later in the day going, I kept interrupting you, and I'm sorry. And he was very aware of it. But
Yeah, that's shocking. He noticed.
Well, I think I mentioned it to him once or twice, and then he noticed it more after that. But it's all about trying to do it with a sense of humor, I guess, too, as you're pushing forward.
I am remembering a couple of things. A couple of times when men have been rivals to me for something. When they think that they've won or they're trying to win, they've done two of them did funny things. One of them put their hand on my head and pushed me down, and the other one sort of put their hand on my shoulder and pushed me down. It's like literally a physical sort of thing of dominance. Of dominance. It was fascinating. And I was thinking of on Alias, which was a really complicated show, and the production meetings we had the writer of the episode or the writers of the episode, maybe one or two people, but we never had JJ or anybody, the director or anybody in it, because I just had to kind of corral everybody to get the wind up to be able to do it, because we get the scripts late and it had to be fast and stuff. And JJ had hired this guy, came in, and he was an EP, so he decided he'd come to the production meeting. And first I was like, I don't know what he's doing there, so I'm ignoring him. And then I noticed that all the men, head of departments that were in the meeting, would talk to him and not to the two women writers. And at the end of the meeting, everybody left, and I said, you're not coming to this meeting again. And he's like, well, I've never heard of a show that didn't have an executive producer in the production meeting. And I said, well, I will call Disney and they'll make me an executive producer. But you're not coming in that meeting because it doesn't work for us. This is how we do it. This is how we've done it. It's very successful. It doesn't need to be changed. And then I went to JJ and I said, he's not coming in the meeting. You can give me a new title, but he's not coming in the meeting. And so he didn't, and he was shocked, apparently, very shocked that he couldn't.
But just
do
his
that.
presence changed everyone else's
And his
behavior.
presence had changed the dynamic, and I was like, I'm not having it, because I'm the one that has to get this show on the road. It was really a heavy lifting job. It was not easy to figure out how to do the shows at all.
But that's also fearlessness in leading. I mean, you took control of a situation that had affected every single person in that room, and you handled it. And that's what we don't experience when we're not with you.
Yeah, I have to say that. I have to say I've worked with different costume supervisors, and the most recent one that I worked said, wow, she said, I'm so impressed how Sarah really looks out for the crew. And I thought, oh, maybe I've just taken it for granted for a while because we work together. And I'm like, yeah, of course she does. And it was really a shock to her to see like how we weren't, expendable. That, you needed to come back the next day and continue the good work, and that there were things that were stopped. Thank you for that.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a history of Hollywood with a management team of brothers and sisters. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is not the end of the conversation, it's just the end of this episode. I'm going to put up the second half of this conversation next week so that you can hear the rest of it. I mean, seriously, how often are you privy to this kind of conversation? I know I'm not, so I'm hoping you're enjoying it. I'd like to thank Sarah Caplan, Suzanne Geiger, Cynthia Pusheck, Sally Sue Beisel-Lander, Denny Dugally, Ida Lee Henderson, and Melina for telling their stories, individually and their collective story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, The Other 50%, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Also check out our sister podcast at The Other 50%, a history of tech. Thanks for listening. See you next time.